Hello, everybody. Welcome to UFO Enigma. I'm Ron Ricky, your host. Now, today we're going to jump all over the globe here and discuss some of the more recent sightings the last year or so. And on the last show, as we were winding down, I was just starting to read an article to you on a New York woman named Martha Wheat. Now, she had four very good sightings. And I know I'd already gotten into a couple of them before the show ended, but I think I'm going to skip back again and we're going to start from the beginning again. Now, this was a pretty interesting article, and it came out of the Our Town's newspaper of Rochester, New York. The date line was January 4th of 95, and title was Woman Recalls Weird Sky Sightings. And okay, this article is about a woman named Martha Wheat, and she sort of proves the theory that I've alluded to many times, that some people are more prone to observe, get multiple UFO observations than other people. And some people are lucky to get one, and this woman's had four good ones. Okay, now this article went on to give her a little background on the woman and everything, but we'll skip that, and we'll just go right down to the four sightings. Okay, now, the first happened in the late 70s when a retired Air Force officer let Martha and her husband, Brad, look through his binoculars at a pair of UFOs that he was watching. And the two objects were off in the distance. She described them as shiny, oval, and copper in color. Now, she was kind of lucky because she had an expert right there, and she asked him what he thought they were, being the Air Force officer. Now, the officer said that they were definitely not one of ours, and he went on to say that nothing we have can hover for that length of time and in that manner. And he couldn't identify him as anything, so to him they were unknown. Now, that was the first sighting she had. Now, the second one happened in 1979 while they were living in Clearwater, Florida. They were walking along the beach at about 5 in the afternoon. It was nice and sunny. They noticed about 40 or 50 people gazing out over the Gulf of Mexico. Now, these people were watching a group of UFOs hovering, and they mainly, for this whole period of this sighting, they mainly stayed stationary, but every once in a while they would move to the left and then to the right. And what was more odd was the length of this sighting. They were in view for several hours. Now, don't forget, this is about 10 years before the Great Gulf Breeze episode, and this might have been just part of a big buildup in the Florida area previous to this Maine sighting. Okay, that was her first set of sightings. Now, the second, Martha's second was no less interesting. She was driving home from Rhode Island. Now, I would imagine she's living back here in the area of New York. She was driving through Rhode Island on the Connecticut Turnpike, and with her was her husband and sister. So here we have a multiple witness sighting again. They were driving along pretty good, about 55, 60 miles an hour, when they saw a pair of black UFOs pacing the car. Now, it seems these flat black type of UFOs are getting more coverage. There seems to be a lot more of them appearing lately, and even more so back then. In the last 20 years, you really didn't hear too much about that particular color UFO. Usually they were shiny, silvery colored ones, but these primed ones look like they're starting to make a good dent. Now, they couldn't get too much detail because they were driving along the highway, other than that the UFOs were oval in shape and black in color. Now, Martha claimed that this episode was, to her, very traumatic, so much so that she blocked it out for a time. And if I can just go for one side. Now, how many times have I reported on articles where people have done just that same thing? The episode has been erased from their minds, but something's bothering them, and under hypnotic regression, it comes back. Okay, now this would happen to her, and what was strange about it is when they got home, they found that an 8-hour trip took them 10 hours. Now, here we go, lost time. And how many stories have I read you that had this in it also? Okay, now they said that they had made the usual gas and restroom stops, and I got to ask a question here. Did Martha block out the incident, or was it blocked out? And what about the others with her? The article really never said too much about her husband or her sister. Now, to me, on this series of 4 encounters, this was her most important one. That missing time is of great importance. Now, her other, she said this happened when she and her late aunt had stopped at a fast food, this was right after this highway incident. They stopped at a fast food drive-through, and they ordered some food, and then they parked out and back to get to eat whatever they had bought there. Now this was much later, and all of a sudden, as they were sitting there, a blue-green metallic UFO sped by at treetop level. Now this craft was also oval in shape like the rest she had seen, but a different color. And it all happened so fast that all they could do was look at each other and say, "Did you see that?" It was just a blink of an eye type of a sighting. Now that was the third in her line. Now the fourth and last sighting happened while she was pulling into a parking lot at the place where she worked. Now she was a bookkeeper for the Temple Brith Kodesh, and as she pulled into the parking lot, she noticed a strange-looking saucer moving slowly over the temple parking lot. You know, it wasn't a clear day, it was raining, but she said when she rolled the window down, she could get a very good look at it, and because it was just about 100 feet away. I mean, that's a nice close sighting. She described this vehicle as being about 4 times the size of a compact car, so you put it about maybe the standard 25 or 30 foot disc. Now, again, this was an oval-shaped craft, but this one was a little bit different in the appearance. It had 4 poles sticking out of it, and on the end of these poles were pods. Now, it moved very slowly with a sort of rolling motion, and she watched it until it silently disappeared over the roof of some neighboring houses. Martha did report this particular sighting to the police. It didn't say if she had reported the other ones, but this one she did. Now, the police told her that they had received no other UFO reports on any UFO sightings, and the dispatcher had called a local FAA tower, and he had inquired of them about it, and they reported that they received no reports at all, and that there was nothing unusual appearing on their radar. But keep in mind, the UFO that she saw was low over a parking lot, and more than likely, if this thing had skimmed out over low, it might have gone undetected. Now, Martha asked herself why she was having so many of these UFO encounters, and she answered her own question by saying that she was like a very open-minded person, and whoever is piloting these craft can easily pick up on things like this. And I sort of agree with that, because I've read many stories where, like her, some people have hundreds of sightings. Look at Ed Walters down at Gulf Breeze a few years ago. I mean, pictures, all kinds of pictures, and encounters that he had. He was picked up by a beam, and these people all seem to be clustered in the same group. They're very outgoing, and they're receptive to all kinds of emanations, let's say. You know, they're just the right type that these people are looking for. Okay, now we've got a couple of older sightings here, and this here's an article that had a pretty good story about an Ohio UFO. Now, the article is out of the News of Lima, Ohio, and the date line was January 7th of 94, so this is kind of a dated one. But, it's interesting. I haven't reported on it yet. The title of the article was Eastern Allen Skies Shine Mysteriously with Unknown Lights. Now, Allen is the county. I read the report very carefully. And this is interesting because it's a report where a qualified UFO researcher actually did the article. He's a 71-year-older named John P. Timmerman. Now, Mr. Timmerman has been a UFO researcher since the 1950s, so he's been able to cover some of the real good ones. And he is presently the vice president for the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies in Chicago, very prestigious organization in this field. Now, Timmerman lectures in the area, and he is also was brought to mind that he is a amateur astronomer. Now, on October 19th, 1994, a woman was driving in a northerly direction and reported a large object moving in a north to south direction. The observation took place at 4:30 in the morning, and the report itself was kind of sketchy. No other information was really given in the article. Now, but that was sort of the icebreaker. After that last report came a flood of others. The next one they had reported was a husband and wife had reported seeing a curved ring of lights near Waynesfield, Ohio. Then a person, keep in mind that curved ring of lights, because that motif sort of stays in this particular group of sightings, which leads me to believe that it was one group of UFOs that was interested in a certain area at that time. Okay, then a person driving alone near the Allen-Hardin County line reported seeing an object larger than the moon fly over. Now, larger than the moon could be anything. If you held like a half a dollar at arm's length, that would probably be the size of a full moon. But getting the distance, you don't have anything to triangulate. It's just a good idea of telling you how big it is. Okay, now, granted, these reports singly, they're not too impressive because the lack of real detailed information, but sort of bunched together, they're starting to make a pretty good little story, a nice little series of sightings. Now, as the flood of reports started coming in, Mr. Timmerman said, he asked himself the question, what's going on here? He was trying to get a little more information on the October 19th sighting by scouting around and looking for witnesses and who might have seen that particular one. And all of a sudden now he's starting to get inundated with good reports. Now, he claims the witnesses are all credible people, and they aren't trying to cause a nuisance by just calling up someone, calling up a UFO group and saying, gee, I saw a light over 138 or something, just to have something to say. These people, they were genuinely concerned, and they made the call. They had seen something, and well, if you remember back, I don't know how many times, 1 really in 10 people report a sighting. So if you have a conscientious group there, you try to cater to them. Now, Timmerman also claims that he is receiving a lot of reports of orange balls of light and white balls of light. And what's more important than actually the colors is how these lights manifest themselves in a strange configuration all the time. You had that semicircle and different, they're making little patterns in the sky. Now, Timmerman also claims that he's looking forward to getting to the bottom of this mini-flap. And, well, I've been studying not quite as long as him, but I don't know, it sort of remains to be seen how far he's going to get, because it started with Kenneth Arnold, really, the modern era, and I don't think they've let out any real solid information yet, so we'll just have to keep an eye on what's going on. Okay, now let's get to another. I've got so many newspaper articles here. This one here is the Herald Review article. Now, this was an article, it's sort of a two-parter. It comes out of the Herald reunion of Mammoth Lakes, California. The date line was December 14th of 94, so we're not too far. It's fairly new. And the headline reads, Sierra Sightings Investigated by UFO Group. Now, the first part, that's the first part. The second part was titled, Two Saw Something That Made No Sound. Okay, now we'll do one part at a time here. The first part quotes a Jeffrey Nelson, who is the co-founder of Unexplained Phenomena Investigations, or UPI for short. And the outfit is based in Kirkland, Washington. And it seems to me that they're on the ball, because they're in Washington and they're really reporting on a California sighting. So they're going right out of their local sphere. This must be a pretty knowledgeable group of people. Now, Mr. Nelson claims that more than 100 people from all walks of life have reported unusual lights over the eastern Sierra skies. Now, this has been happening over a period of time, but in recent times. The article went on to say that we'll just call it UPI, is a privately funded organization. It includes in its membership a wide spectrum of people, including a retired NASA scientist. Now, there's the kind of guy you want to have helping you solve a mystery like this. Scientists, especially of the space program, are very cut and dry, and to have a guy move into this real enigma type field, you're really lucky to get a guy like that. Okay, now Nelson claims that they have been their sightings that have been coming in, what's been called into them, has been coming in a pretty good clip, and it's been coming from coast to coast. And he claims that the goal of the UPI is to prove that what people are seeing all over the country aren't hallucinations, but more or less of a common experience. And I can go with that. That's, I think the UFO Enigma is a common experience. It just happens worldwide, and they're just going to go out to prove it. But then again, if they do, is another thing. We'll have to keep watching that. But I can agree with that particular statement. But he did make, let me see now, as he went on in this article here on part one, Nelson claimed that several people, now it's getting closer to us, he didn't say what part of the East Coast, but he said several people on the East Coast have reported what appeared to be stealth bombers. And what makes this sort of interesting is that these people reported that these craft hovered and made absolutely no sounds. Now, I've gone to air shows where the F-117, the stealth fighter, has flown over. They never land this plane so you can get a good look at it, but they do fly it over kind of slow. And boy, you have to be deaf not to know the thing isn't coming. So when you see something that looks like a stealth bomber hovering and making no noise, it's enough to pique the curiosity. Okay, now this little part of this article went on to say that although a lot of these witnesses were within 15 miles of many Air Force bases in and around these sighting areas, Nelson insisted that none of the UFOs were military aircraft. You know, he must have some pretty good information if he can be that definite in a statement like that. Okay, now that was sort of, you know, there's a nice little article getting people introduced to a new organization, and the second part had to do with a pretty nice little sighting. Now that part was titled "Two Saw Something That Made No Sound." I thought it was a pretty interesting sighting, and it could have been reported a little bit more in detail, but the time and the place is kind of sketchy. But the article says that it took place in late August of '94, and it happened in the Monmouth Lakes area. Now, I don't know how many stories, and really people that have told me stories like this from around here, and I've even done shows on some of these real big ones cases up in Maine and wooded areas and very sparsely populated areas. Okay, there was two fellas here. Now, they were just winding up a day of fishing, and they were sitting on a rock resting, and as they looked up into the sky above a lake they called Steelhead Lake, they saw something. Now, their stories, according to the article, they backed each other up pretty good. And at first they thought it was a piece of trash caught up in the wind, like a trash bag or something, and the kind of movement it was making. It was sort of fluttering, and as they kept watching it, this thing was fluttering into the wind. So it really wasn't going a piece of debris going with the wind. This was traveling into the wind. So now their curiosities, they're really interested, and they pulled out a pair of binoculars from their knapsack, and they wanted to get a closer look. Now, through the field glasses, they saw the object as a white, egg-shaped craft flying approximately 3,000 feet in the air. I would imagine that's just a guess from a layman's guess. Both men agreed that the object had white probes. Now, this is a very interesting point in this article because it more or less goes with something like Martha Wheat's third encounter, where she saw the probes on the temple object, the object that was flying over the temple parking lot. Now, this is kind of close, and it was purely by accident that I put these two things together, but it worked out pretty good. Okay, they agreed that this object had white probes, or spikes, on the part that they believed to be the back of the craft. Now, then something very startling happened. The spikes retracted into the craft at about 10 seconds. Now, I want to go aside here. I like to pick these little things apart, especially good items in a sighting. Now, were these men being monitored? Were these spikes some sort of a monitor that was picking up maybe their thoughts, whatever they thought, or even cameras, or everything, taking pictures of them? Are these guys being targeted, or are they already a member of a group of people that are being examined and lifted off in ships every once in a while? They claim that the object moved freely, as if it was bouncing on the air. You probably get that idea. The fluttering motion has been reported many times in a lot of UFO encounters, but they reiterated again that it was definitely powered as it was moving into the wind. Now, after it disappeared for a while, it stayed in sight for a while, it disappeared over the mountains, and the two men saw two military jets flying in the opposite direction of the UFO out over the western side of the Sierras. And when asked if they thought the UFO was a military aircraft. One of them said, "It ain't from Earth." And that was in quotes in the paper. So he knew what he was looking at, and it wasn't an airplane. Now, a little humorous sidelight to the story was that these guys, whenever they go hiking or fishing or camping, they make sure they, along with their binoculars, they bring cameras and the whole 9 yards. And I'd be willing to bet dollars to donuts that they probably won't see anything again. So, but it's good to, good to be prepared. And it was interesting again that with such a nice story like this, the two men didn't want to give their names for fear of ridicule, and that stigma still hangs on here. People have good sightings, and a lot of people won't even report the sighting because of that one fact. Now, got a few more minutes here to go, and I said we were going to be jumping all over the world, and they had two good stories from England, and I managed to get one written down here. And this is out of the Bedfordshire Time, Bedford, England, and the date was October 28th of '94. The headline reads, "Close Encounters Prompt the New Probe into UFOs." Now, this article here tells of the many strange occurrences, and I think maybe I'll stick with this story. I'm going to do this. I'll continue this one on the next article, as time will allow, and tells of the many strange occurrences in and around the town of Bedford, England. Two men, Kenneth Parsons and Charles Allen, have formed. See, this is another UFO investigating group. Were formed recently to study mainly these local phenomena, and they must have some interest in the area, because in 1 month, in 1 month's time, they've amassed a 14-member roster. Now that's pretty good. If I wanted to form a group, I'd probably have to wait 2 years to form a 14-member group. But this is New England, not Old England. Okay, now they call their group the Bedford Earth and Aerial Mystery Society, BEAMS for short. Now, there is an air base nearby, and they have listed some pretty good sightings in and around this air base area. Now, the first sighting was of 10 triangular UFOs flying over and around a place called Cranfield Airfield. That must be a mouthful if you're trying to say it fast. Cranfield Airfield, landing, but that's neither here nor there. The objects were orange in color, and all of them, which another interesting sidelight to this thing, all of them had a white ring around them. They didn't say if the ring was a solid ring or a halo-type ring like that's been reported in many of the Florida sightings. I've got a lot of more information here, so this report here will give you in the next show, we'll give you the rest of the reports, and we're going to run down all the most of the crazy things that have been happening in this little town of Bedford. And it sounds like a pretty interesting place to live if you're interested in that subject. But now, it's time for me to wind up the old ball of yarn by saying, just keep watching those skies for the UFOs. Bye-bye.